my keeping bees and producing a drain on the family finances by virtue of having to buy all this stuff. Next slide, please. So I needed to make some money, right, in order to pay for my honey addiction. And doing that kind of led me into this whole enterprise of value-added products and figuring out how best to use the resources given to me by these wonderful creatures in my care so as to finance that endeavor. Okay, so this I find very interesting. I found that online there. You know, thou shalt not steal. So the person not only has not an a very well presented honey display, but they're kind of casting aspersions on your honor when you come to buy the honey, you know, by reminding you that you can't steal. Next slide, please. So I have found that if you make a variety of products, people will buy more. Not only will they buy these things, but they will buy more honey because they're at your stand. They're not looking at one thing, okay? They're looking at all kinds of things, and they're saying, gee, look, I can, you know, look at this lip balm. These are great stocking stuffers for my nieces and nephews and my kids. And, oh, Grandma probably would really like this lotion bar for because she's always complaining about her dry elbows. And, you know, I just remembered my father-in-law loves honey. Maybe and so instead of having a purchase of one $7 jar of honey or $9 or whatever you're charging for your honey, this person has now bought maybe $35 worth of stuff or $40 worth of stuff. Okay, and you're still just making things from what you got out of the hive. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the whole idea of value added. You know, here's somebody who's got, there's honey over here, but he's got bananas and he's got some other fruit, so he has all of the makings for a nice breakfast. Okay, next slide, please. And here is someone with a nice stand, which I think demonstrates very nicely the idea of varietal honeys. You know, look at all the different colors of honey there. Doesn't that make you want to try them? Doesn't that make you wonder, you know, wow, I wonder what this one tastes like as opposed to that one? Now, if you taste Cynthia's honey, Cynthia's honey got like the best tasting honey in New Jersey last year at the honey show. So I would want to taste her honey. I did taste her honey. It's really good. So that's a value-added thing. They've got pollen up there. You know, somebody going to that display is more likely to buy more than one thing. Next slide, please. Now, here's the opposite. And you can see this guy doesn't look very busy, does he? In fact, I think he's taking a nap. All he has, okay, is jars of honey. That's it. So when he sells something, he's going to sell a jar of honey, and that's all he has. Okay? He's not making a lot of money. All right. So where are you going to go with this? There's so many different things you can do. You know, I just brought a few things. This is not all the stuff we make. It's just what I could fit into one box. And we're getting ready to do our biggest show of the year starts tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so at the Armory in Morristown, we're doing a big show. So I've been very busy, and I just grabbed a few things to show you. But where do you start? Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with something you already know very well. Go ahead, hit the button, Kevin. Yay! Your honey. Okay, next slide, please. What can you do with honey? Let's talk about varietal honey. You can't see this very well. You know what? I'm going to pass it around. when you turn the light on, you'll see these honeys, they're all different colors. And there's 3 different varieties there. There's blueberry blossom honey, which I buy from Grant because we don't actually do pollination. There's wildflower, which we produce, and there's linden wildflower, which we produce. Okay, so 3 different kinds of honey in a very nice gift set. When you put it on the, if you get, like this is black locust honey here, very pale, real wonderful early honey, and sitting right next to it is Japanese bamboo, okay, which I'll be pulling now. And they taste totally different. And when people walk into my honey house and look at that on the shelves, they're asking themselves, wow, look at those 2 honeys. You know, this is not golden blossom. You know, what do those taste like? And I have customers, you know, all the time who will buy 1 of each, just to see. Next slide, please. And then you can make the spread. And you can do all kinds of things with honey spreads. This is creamed honey, cubed. You know, this is creamed honey any way you want to make it. And I'll tell you how to make it. Now over here, we used to do like honey and nuts and things, and I stopped doing those because I actually stopped doing them because I didn't want to have nuts in my processing operation in case somebody was allergic. You know, but at a smaller level, I think you could do it. Okay, next slide. Yes, honey spreads. There are people who don't like honey. I know that may seem really bizarre to you guys. It's bizarre to me, but there actually are people who grew up eating, you know, just refined sugar, and they really just don't like the taste of honey. You can sell them honey by making spreads that taste like cinnamon or blackberries or lemon or, you know, cranberries or whatever it is that you want to. And you can get them to buy that product even though they don't like honey by emphasizing to them what the health benefits of honey are. You know, people want honey for allergies. Well, spread this on your toast. Cinnamon honey, okay? You're getting all the benefits of the wildflower honey for allergies. It's still raw, local honey. You won't be sneezing. And it tastes like cinnamon. So guidelines for doing this: experiment in small batches and let your customers sample. Next slide, please. Because if you can get them to try it, you have a sale. All right, next slide. So, regular creamed honey. Did I bring the regular creamed? I think I did. Yeah, here's my creamed honey. Okay, very easy to make. Do most of you know, or do you guys know about the dice method of creamed honey? Nope. Okay. All right. The dice method of creamed honey was developed by, gee, I don't remember his first name. Do you remember his first name? Up at Cornell. Charles? Maybe, I think could be Charles. Professor up at Cornell. Honey crystallizes naturally. Why? Because chemically it's a supersaturated solution, and the sugars, there are too many sugars in solution to stay in solution. They want to precipitate out. So the honey crystallizes. And the ideal temperature for crystallization is 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? So if you leave your honey sitting around, particularly in this season and in spring, temperatures are often around 57, you'll find it gets hard and crunchy. All right. So if you can control the way it crystallizes so that the crystals are very small, you'll get a creamy spread. And that's the essence of the dice method. What you do is you take some honey, you warm it to get rid of any crystals that are in there. And you don't have to warm it to high temperatures. 100 degrees, 105 degrees is fine. Still raw, okay? But you're melting any crystals that are in there. You filter it so that there's no extraneous particles around which crystals might form. And you add seed honey, which is creamed honey. Very fine quality creamed honey with very small crystals. You put in 5 to 10%, you stir it up, and you let it sit at 57 degrees, and you will get, after about a week, a little less creamed honey. Okay, looks like this. This is creamed honey with a variation. It's really whipped honey. So this is not made using the dice method, because I found that to get a spread that really has a great texture, okay, you have to beat it. And that's what I do. Okay. Creamed honey is easy to make. Go ahead. Hit it again. Okay. Artisan honey spread. Go ahead. Also easy to make, and you're adding other things, okay, to get different flavors. Okay, next slide. So, I've got straight cream honey. I'm going to melt my honeys here because that thing is hot. I'll pass these around. You just check out the color of that creamed honey. Okay, mostly creamed honeys are darker than that, made using the dice method. But when you whip it, and if you do it right, you'll get this. It's almost like a shampoo-like consistency, and it's so smooth. It's got the texture of butter.
Are you whipping crystallized honey, or are you just whipping liquid honey?
You're whipping liquid honey that has had 5 to 10%, seed honey added to it, and you're keeping it at a low temperature.
Do you use a KitchenAid mixer or what?
No, I use I have a big bottling tank with a big thing, but you can use a KitchenAid mixer. You can. I'm going to show you a couple of ways. You can also use a cordless drill. You can, and there's a slide in here that shows you how to set that up so you could make like a 5-gallon pan.
And this won't go back to liquid form once you whip it?
Well, I'm going to tell you how to keep it from doing that. You don't want to let it get hot. If you keep it in a room at like 85 degrees or something, it's going to melt. So I keep ours that are actually in a cooler in the honey house. Okay, so this is how you make them. You warm your liquid honey to about 100 degrees for a couple of days. Let it cool. Add your seed honey. Add your extra stuff. Okay. Oh, did we skip a step? Let's go back one. Here we go. Right. This is really important for a good quality product. And it's not anything that you will normally find in the literature, but it's something that I've discovered makes a big difference. You want to adjust the water content of your honey so that it's around 18% if you're making straight cream honey, and if you're making, even higher than what that says. That says 17.5% for straight cream. I do 18% now, and I do 18.5 for any honey that has an additive in it, like a powder, like cinnamon. The reason is the powders really suck up the moisture. And if you don't increase the moisture content enough, your final product, you'll need a hammer and a chisel to get it out of the jar. It's too hard. It's just not spreadable. So to get a good texture, shoot for 18.5%. And you actually will add water to your honey to get that. You guys have refractometers? You need a refractometer
We
too.
have a group refractometer.
Okay, good. Great.
We also own a polariscope.
Nice. So you can actually check your honey to see if it's suitable for the show. Yeah. Okay, so refractometer, and I don't have a digital one. I have the old-fashioned kind, costs about $65. And I actually will test every bucket of honey that I pour out of the extractor, and I put it right on the label, so I know what the moisture content of that honey is. I'm going to show you how to make the calculation. But this is what you want if you're going to make an artisan spread. You know, buzzword used to be gourmet, now it's artisan. Buy the smoothest, best quality seed honey you can find. Great place to get that seed honey is at the auction following our state honey show. Go to the winter meeting and bid on whoever won first place, you know. Okay, next slide. Okay, adjust the water content, and I'm going to tell you how to do that. And then you beat your honey at high speed until it turns this white color and has this wonderful texture like shampoo. You bottle it. As soon as it gets there, you put it in the freezer. That locks the bubbles in place and prevents them from rising to the top. Okay, so you don't get like a layer of foam on the top of your jar. And then, next day, you take it out of the freezer and put it in your refrigerator at that temperature, 55 to 57 degrees. Okay, and after 5 days, you will have beautiful cream honey. Next slide, please. Okay, warming the honey. That's my little bucket warmer, which I made using thermostat from Kelly. Walter Kelly sells these guys, nice thermostat, and a igloo cooler, you know, insulated cooler. There's some light bulbs in there, and you know, shelves. You can make this stuff. It's no big deal. And you put your bucket in there, you set the thermostat, and you know, you let it warm up. And picture you cool it. You're not going to make creamed honey if your honey is at 85 degrees. You're just going to melt the seed honey. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, right, we talked about that. So in a 5-gallon pail, 60 pounds of honey, so 5% is 3 pounds and 10% is 6 pounds. The more creamed honey you add, the faster it will set. But you can, you know, if you are a little patient, you can use less creamed honey. Okay, next slide, please. The water content. So, you have to weigh the water. And for almost everything that I'm going to tell you here how to make, you need a good scale. Not a kitchen scale, but a real scale. Mine that I use for making soap and so on cost me about $100. And you can get them online, you know, good scale. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's an example, concrete example of how you would do that. Say you've got a water content of 15.5%. That's pretty dry honey. You know, if you turn that honey in the jar upside down, it'll take a long time for the bubble to go up. So you know that that's not going to be good for your creamed honey. And you're making creamed cinnamon honey. So you really want a water content of about 18.5% or close to it. Okay, I picked like 18.3 here. So the amount of water in the honey before you do anything is 0.155 times 60 pounds, because it's 15.5%, which is 9.3 pounds of water, right? In that 5-gallon pail. Everybody see that? No one's nodding. I'm getting nervous. You guys see that? 15.5% times 60 pounds gives you 9.3 pounds of water. But what you want is 18.3%. So that's 0.183 times 60 pounds, which is 11 pounds of water. So I have to add the difference between 11 and 9.3, which is 1.7 pounds of water I have to add to that 60-pound bucket. You guys get that? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. That is, I needed that. All right, and you weigh it. You weigh it. We're not saying, don't tell me, okay, here's an ounce, I'm 16 ounces. No, we're weighing it. It's not volumetric, it's by weight. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, and then now you can add your goodies. You must use dry ingredients. If you use like real fruit, wet fruit, and stuff like that, you're going to cause mold. Okay, so I only ever use dry ingredients. like fresh herbs. I mean, you know, you can make something, you can make infused honeys, but that's a whole different process. Okay, and I'm not an expert in that, I'm not going to talk about it here. So, freeze-dried powdered fruits and spices work really well. And you can buy them from companies like Wilderness Naturals and, you know, and that's terrific. And when you're experimenting, when I experiment, I always start with a pound of additive per pail of honey and mess around with it from there. I'll mix it up, see if I like it, if it's an intense enough flavor. If it's not, I'll add more. You know, I can adjust from there. Okay, next slide, please. Mix it up and just keep beating. Now, I used to have this wonderful motor on my Maxamps. In fact, next slide. Yeah, and the next one. I guess this one. There it is. That motor died on me. You know, I had the tank for maybe 12 years, 15 years, and then my motor died, and they gave me another one, and it's not as fast. So I've had to change the way I make the honey a little bit, and you may not be able to get a really fast motor either. So it takes a little longer, but what I do is I'll let the honey set in a cool environment in the tank until it begins to crystallize, and then I'll beat it. Okay? And then I'll turn it off and let it set a little more. And then I'll beat it for a few hours. Now, when I made the creamed honey that's floating around here, it took 2 whole weeks before that was actually ready. Once it starts to go, it happens in a matter of hours. It just goes boom like that, and it becomes, you know, what you want. But you have to kind of play with it, because as you beat it, you're introducing heat friction to the honey. So if you watch your thermostat will go up. When it starts to get like around 80, you got to turn it off. Otherwise, you're going to melt the seed honey. So my process is now trickier than it used to be, unfortunately. But it still works. We can still do it. Okay, do we want to go back a couple of slides? Yeah. All right. We got that one. Let's go to the next one. This is beating up a batch of creamed honey. Next one, cinnamon honey. I continue to beat while I'm bottling it so that I don't get a bunch of air bubbles at the end of the run. And I've since found I don't need a larger gate. The dripless valve for extracted honey works just fine for these really fine spreads. Put them in the freezer, then you move them to the cooler next day. Okay. Next. Yeah, this is the setup without a beater. Okay, there's 2 buckets here. I think this one is actually a taller bucket, but I cut a hole in the top bucket, okay, and I've got this gizmo where I've strapped the drill, and it's a corded drill because that's powerful. Cordless drill is not powerful. I've strapped it here so that it doesn't jiggle around, and I've got a paint mixer in there. Okay, you have to be careful about not burning out the drill, the motor on the drill, which I've done. But you know, you can jury rig a system like this and use it to make really good things. And that's the cooler, okay, that I have in my honey house where we sell it. It's actually a beverage cooler, and that works great. A lot of these things are really easy to make. Okay, next slide. So, getting the cappings to usable wax is pretty easy, and this is the same process that you would use for preparing any beeswax entries for the honey show. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's your cappings, right? And this is what I get. I get like a block from my, what do we call that thing? My cappings melter. Yeah, it's not a, well, but the solar wax melter is the same thing. You'll get that too. But you get your block of dirty wax, I put it in a pan, a pot that I use only for that. You're never going to want to use this pot for anything else. And you add water. Not an exact amount of water, just, you know, maybe half and half, something like that. Enough water so that the dirt can go into solution. And you put that on your burner and you warm that, okay, at kind of low to medium temperature until the wax melts. You're not going to walk away from this. Beeswax is very flammable, okay? In water, it's not so bad, but you got to keep your eye on this. Once it's melted, you pour it into a container. What happens is the beeswax floats, the water, the dirty water, stays at the bottom, okay? After it solidifies, you take it out of that container and you turn it over. You're going to find all this slum gum and stuff. That is what it is, it's slum gum, on the bottom of the block of wax. And you can then just scrape that off with your hive tool. Okay, and you've got a relatively clean, a much cleaner block of wax. Next slide. Then you take that, see it's still kind of dirty. Now, I use this sort of double, I like coffee cans for working with wax because you can use the bigger ones like a double boiler. So, now that's a 2-pound coffee can because I had a bunch of wax inside my pot. But you can also put your wax in a 1-pound coffee can and put that inside a 2-pound coffee can. And you can, you know, put spouts in them and everything. So they're very convenient because they're disposable. Once you're done with it, you just throw it away. So I'm melting this inside a clean coffee can. There's water in the outside pot. This is the makeshift double boiler. All right? And once that wax is melted, I pour it into filters, okay? I like yogurt, quart-sized yogurt containers work very well. Don't use like Chinese soup containers because they'll melt. Even milk cartons, cardboard milk cartons, anything that you can cut open when you're done and just throw away. And you can use virtually any kind of fabric to filter. T-shirt fabric works great, or even sweatshirt fabric. And you kind of poke it down a little bit in the top so that it forms like a little bowl. So when you pour your wax in, it's not going to overflow. Rubber band, pour the wax in. Any dirt will accumulate on the fabric, okay? And the clean wax goes down in the bottom, and you're left with these nice, really beautifully clean blocks of wax that you can then use for anything, okay? Making candles, show entries. Next slide, please. Okay, so you guys are all familiar with the Bible story of the loaves and the fishes, where Jesus started with 1 loaf of bread and 1 fish, and had a lot of hungry people he was talking to, and he didn't have any of the wonderful people that you have here to bake brownies and cookies and make vegetables and stuff. So he performed a miracle and made like all these loaves of bread and tons of fish, and everybody got to eat. So, you know, I use this analogy. You can do the same thing with your cosmetics and your beeswax products. So I have one lip balm recipe which I have shared with you guys. Okay, we have 5 varieties of lip balm. There's strawberry smoothie, raspberry something, luscious lemon, pina colada, fresh lips, peppermint. Okay, so there's 5 products that I make. This is Nancy Punell's hand cream display with my hand cream recipe. And that picture is from probably 15 years ago. She has like all different fragrances in the hand cream, and people can buy one of each. And you can have the same container and just different labels. And you've got multiple products. Next slide, please. Okay. Making creams and lotions. You might decide you would like to design your own creams and lotions, which I got into, and that's a little more challenging, but I'm going to give you a few guidelines. In fact, if you want to try these, this is our That's my lotion. That's my own recipe. And this is a facial moisturizer that I also made. So there's two types. There's oil and water, and there's water and oil. And because oil and water don't mix, all creams require an emulsifier. An emulsifier is the thing that makes oil and water mix. Okay? So in that beeswax hand cream recipe I gave you, the emulsifier is borax. Okay, next slide, please. So, making any kind of a cream or lotion, you have 4 phases, and the proportions vary. Creams have more oil, lotions have more water. That's the only difference between them. Next slide, please. And these are the guidelines. If you want to play with this, this is the slide you should take a picture of with your camera. But you can even find these things online. Okay. So several of the products that we make, like that, the facial moisturizer probably took me about a year to develop that recipe, just tweaking it the whole time until it was where I liked it. And you must, if you don't want to refrigerate it, you do need to use a preservative. The one I would recommend is called Germabin 2. Not liquid germol. It's propylene glycol free and formaldehyde free. So when you pick a preservative, really read carefully, the description of the properties. Propylene glycol and formaldehyde are very common allergens. So if you want to keep your product as natural as possible, those are things you want to avoid. Okay. And this is my rule of thumb for fragrance, for either essential oils or fragrance oils. Usually about 1/2 to 1 tablespoon of fragrance per pound of product. And that's a good working rule of thumb. Next slide, please.
What type of oil do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
I use different oils depending on the different things that I'm making. Sweet almond oil is a nice one. We use for a liquid oil. Olive oil is also good, but it can be very heavy. So I use, sometimes I use olive oil in soaps. But I probably use more sweet almond oil than anything else. And we use a lot of shea butter and cocoa butter.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is Belle. She was a bee dog. She's since passed on. We loved her. She came and worked bees with me every day. Go ahead, Heather. So these are tips. Experiment in small batches. Don't overheat your ingredients. Cooking this more will not make it better. Okay? The bare amount of heat to melt things, and then you stop. Next slide. And keep your work area scrupulously clean. Go ahead, Kevin, which means that Belle the bee dog is forbidden in the kitchen or wherever it is you're making these things. She can't come in. Okay. So, beeswax soaps. Some of you have come around and smelled these. I got to pass this one around. This is my favorite soap. It's called mistletoe. And if you look at it, it's actually an ombre or shadow soap. So it's got a dark layer at the bottom and then kind of a medium colored layer and then a light layer at the top, and it has a gold like a pencil line in it. So you can really get into soaps. And when we have a display, this is actually the armory, the show that I'm going to be doing. We have a display of, maybe 8 or 10 soaps, and people will come to our booth just because of they're drawn because of the fragrance, because the soap smells so good, and they, this is very, very attractive. And we sell a lot of soap. Next slide, please. It's fun to make. it's a little more complicated than the creams and lotions because you're working with lye. However, if you use reasonable safety precautions, there is no reason you can't make some very, very nice soaps. And the beeswax, adding a very small amount of beeswax, like ½ an ounce per pound of soap, not only makes it more mild and conditioning for the skin, but it also improves the properties of the soap because it makes it trace faster. Trace is a technical term used in soap making, which just indicates the point at which the soap starts to get thick in the pot just before you pour it into the mold. Some soaps, like Castile soap, which is made with olive oil, can take weeks to trace. But if you put beeswax in your soap, you're not going to be waiting around for weeks. Sometimes you're challenged to get it into the mold fast enough. But it's great stuff. And we also have honey soaps. You know, I make soaps with oats and honey, and that's a wonderful soap too. And it's also very conditioning. Next slide, please. So, right, cold process. Cold process is like making bread from scratch. Okay, melt and pour is like buying Pillsbury biscuits and putting them in the oven. Melt and pour is already made soap, those transparent soaps, and you put it in a pot, you melt it down, and you pour it into molds and add fragrance, and that's not really soap making. I'm talking about real soap making, which is made with various kinds of fat, plus water, plus lye. And beeswax is part of your fat component. Next slide, please. So, I can't get into soap a lot right now because it's really a topic for a whole talk. But I just wanted to sort of throw it out there that that's something else you can do with your honey and your beeswax. And we make a lot of money on soap. And when I go to EAS conferences or travel anywhere, I take my own soap with me. I won't use anything else. I'm totally spoiled because it's just so much better. It really is. It's way better. All right, let's talk about labeling a little bit because that's going to make a very large difference in how much you sell, is what your label looks like. And I'm just passing things around. And you should really think about this. If you're going to do this in a commercial way, you need to spend some time and possibly some money in developing a good logo and a good label. And it should reflect your demographic. Okay, if you're in New York City, your label is going to look different than if you're in rural Pennsylvania. You know, in Pennsylvania, maybe you've got a mason jar with like a nice piece of gingham fabric painted and, you know, stuck on the top and a paper bag label. Okay, not in New York. I happen to be in an area, it wasn't like this when I moved there 30 years ago, but it's a very high-end demographic with a lot of really wealthy people, Montville Township. So my labeling reflects that, and I can price my products accordingly. I can charge more for them. Custom labels are worth the expense. Now, the painting that's on my label was actually painted by a beekeeper, Elaine Layton, who is Pete Layton's wife, and Pete and Elaine. So Elaine and Pete and I were hanging out at the Monmouth County Fair one year, going back a long time ago, and I noticed her drawing and painting like these beautiful pictures of dragonflies and butterflies. I mean, just so realistic and vivid. And I said, wow, that's great. Would you paint a label for me? Because I had something in mind. I had something very specific in mind. And she and I worked together, and And she made that a watercolor for me that became our logo and our label. I got it like really cheap because she was unknown at the time, and now she's a very famous artist, and you know, her paintings go for a lot of money. So I got lucky. But I'm glad that I spent the time and the effort really, you know, thinking about and developing a good label. Also, I'm just going to throw this out. You don't have to color your stuff black and gold and yellow. You know, dare to be different. You know, we do purple and green and pink and blue, and they're not traditional honey colors, but they work very well. It's like this. So, some examples. This is Janet Katz's label. 2 cats apiaries, okay? And she found this picture. It's black and white. This is a very inexpensive label. So look at this. This is only 2 colors in this label. Very inexpensive to print, but just as charming as can be. And knowing Janet, of course, you know this is not copyright protected. If you know Janet, that's, you know, she used to work, I guess, in that industry, and she don't dare put a picture up there that doesn't have permission from the author. These are our mousse jars. We sell those, I think, those, and we sell tons of those as wedding cakes. Oh my gosh. Charge $4, between $4 and $4.50, depending on the quantity. That's 4 ounces of honey. I think that's very attractive packaging, you know, and it's not black and gold and yellow, right? Those little gift packages that you can do is that similar to this. Just pass that around. I think these are really cute. Baby bears, each with a different variety of honey. Next slide, please. And there's some more. You know, this is an interesting one because it's got a round label and a queen line jar as opposed to a classic jar. That's very nice too, and with the tamper-proof thing. Okay, there's up on the right, top right there, the Swedish label. You know, that looks like a more rural thing. So spend some thought on it and get your own look. Should be consistent, you know. Okay, next slide. And of course, you also have to obey the law. Honey should be the largest letter on your label. You know, it's got to have your contact information and any other ingredients that you have inside. If it's just honey, you don't have to put anything on. But research the legal requirements for correct labeling before you go out there and do it. Okay. So, that's it.